Welcome. Today we are going to be talking about the 10 most frequently asked questions that Indian immigration clients ask these immigration experts when coming to Canada. Today I am joined by three leading authorities in the Canadian immigration space. My first guest is Sean McKinley of Canadian Immigration and Visa Services, Phil Millar of Millar's Lawyers, a national law firm here at Canada, as well as Anu Kumar, an immigration lawyer with over 10 years experience in the law, as well as she's from New Delhi. Let's get started. Our first question is, how can I immigrate to Canada?
Well, Camille, there are many ways to immigrate to Canada. Generally speaking, one can come through an economic class, that is to study, to work, live, and or invest. Another category is to come through family sponsorship. And an additional category is to apply as a refugee or through asylum.
So if somebody was in New Delhi or in India, what would the first step that you would recommend they take if they wanted to come to Canada?
The first step that they should take is do their language exam and also have their credentials assessed, where they need to apply for education evaluation to see what their education is worth in Canada. And based on that, we do a first assessment for them to figure out what would be the best way for them to come here, under what stream we can put them and apply for permanent residence or apply for a work permit or a study permit.
I think almost the first step when Camille asks, how do I come to Canada? The first thing is you have to start research.
Yes.
And then your research has to involve making sure the people you're dealing with are verified and legitimate, because there's a lot of fraud out there. And the point that you have is, you may want to come to Canada, but if you can't speak English or French, you're not going to get. So that's something that you want to start working on immediately while you go through the process.
To know where they stand, right? If they have the right credentials to be able to even apply for permanent residence.
And then Anu and Sean, if you're looking for a more permanent move through, what options do you have?
It's a great question. Immigration in Canada is a national authority. The Government of Canada, through Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada, makes the final determination about who may enter Canada, either temporarily or permanently. But increasingly, the provinces have developed a shared responsibility in immigration. So when we evaluate a client's eligibility, we look at the foundational credentials that a prospective applicant has, including the educational, language, and other work experiences. Then we also apply those criteria to programs that are available provincially, territorially, and then also through the federal system.
And a lot of the provinces would factor in if you have family members that are already present in Canada that could assist them in coming here.
I think part of the research, when you bring up family members, part of the research, somebody who wants to come here, if they don't already have family or friends here, it's a different kind of process of research than if they're the first person in the family to come here.
That's right.
If you want to be able to verify that the pathway and the people you work with can actually get you here, and they're not just trying to sell you a dream for money. What would you say the difference is if you were a family who doesn't have any connections in Canada versus somebody who does have connections in Canada?
So for somebody who has no connection, usually we would see a lot of young kids or parents that want to send their young kids for education overseas, and they would rely on people that could potentially don't give them the right advice, don't give them the right kind of documents, which is very important for when they first make their application or put their applications together, to have the right documentation, to have the right guidance. Whereas if somebody who has a family member or a family friend already in Canada, they can be directed to the right person who can help them. And that's why, like the kind of work we do, we will do the best. We will do what's best for the applicant. A lot of times people don't have options, but we've seen where like agencies or agents will try and still fit them somewhere, where even though they don't have the eligibility under the program. So having that first assessment and done properly is very important.
I agree, Anu. The eligibility assessment is the first step in exploring what options may be available, whether the first step is to study in Canada, or whether the first step is to work in Canada, or perhaps if all the stars align to apply through the express entry system, to be invited to arrive in Canada directly as a permanent resident.
Interesting. So now that we've established how to immigrate to Canada, let's talk into settlement. So how can I settle into Canada once I've started my immigration process?
Anu?
Go ahead. Okay, sure. So there are different ways in how you can settle. And it kind of goes back to the first question as well. Some people might be eligible to get permanent residence from get-go. They have the right credentials where they can apply for permanent residence, and they might be able to qualify under the investor class. Especially when you look at older, what we have lots of clients where their age is not in their favor, unfortunately, but they do have the means to be able to invest. They do have the right work experience that's required to qualify under the investor class. So people could have options to directly come here as permanent residents under the federal program or the other programs to get from even by the province. There are some provincial programs that allow you to apply for permanent residence while you're overseas. The other would be temporary residence. You could come here as a student, as a work permit, and then work your way towards getting permanent residence. But it's really important to follow the right steps. So when you come here and study, a lot of students don't know that there cannot be gaps in their education. And if they have gaps, they will not qualify to get the work permit after they complete the education. So maintaining that permanent status as a student is really important. So having the guidance of an expert to let them know what necessary steps they need to take that will help them get permanent residence in a few years from now. So I feel that's really important to have guidance throughout.
I think Anu makes a very important point in that it's important to have a plan and to ensure that plan connects to your ultimate immigration goals. If you're seeking permanent residency and or citizenship, it's very important to have the right advice and to follow a plan that will allow you to achieve those goals.
I think people who are listening to this video, that you must be aware, if you're not already aware, that because there's a lot of money involved in immigration, there are a lot of bad actors out there that are doing everything they can to sell you a dream that they're not going to provide. And that's where your research and making sure you speak to people on the ground who can show that they've gotten people into Canada is so important to you, because the desire to take your family into this wonderful country is so powerful that you're vulnerable to shortcuts. You're vulnerable to kind of easy sells. And if you have the money, there's no shortage of people who will take your money and then cast your dreams aside. I know, Sean, you've experienced quite a lot in terms of people even impersonating you. You know, I think that story is something people would love to hear, Ed.
So it's very important to, if you're considering resettlement to Canada, to having professional advice from members of a law society or through the Canadian, the College of Immigration and Citizenship Consultants, members in good standing that have registrations and who are accountable to you as their clients for their advice. Canadian public policy is transitioning in a way that those that have a foot in the door, who have temporary residence, either as a student or as a worker, have a really good chance of becoming a Canadian permanent resident. And the team at Canada Immigration and Visa Services at Ballars and Wares are available to guide you and to help fine-tune your approach to make sure that those important investments that you're making in Canada are aligned with Canadian immigration policy. So it's really important to source out a trusted licensed advisor who's accountable to you. There's so much fraud. I've had the privilege of being overseas in India, in New Delhi, Chandigarh, northern India, Punjab, Mumbai, Ahmedabad, and Gujarat, and there's a consistent theme that that families that have sought out advice through unlicensed, non-regulated agents are invariably cheated. The common occurrence is that they're misrepresented too. In my case, almost every month I'm approached from someone overseas who has a manipulated document purportedly from the government of Canada, which is the first step, which purports to be the first step to temporary residence. The fraudulent bad actors are using this type of documentation to separate our clients and their victims from their hard-earned money and family wealth. So it is very important to know that the person or the entity, the firm that you're dealing with is licensed, is registered, and has a track record of success overseas in helping families come to Canada both temporarily and permanently. And that's why the alignment between our organizations is important, because we have a track record of ethical behavior, competence, and success for our clients. In the case of Canada Immigration Visa Services, we have over a 90% success rate with our clients because we start with an eligibility assessment. We won't lead a client down a garden path. If there isn't a pathway for the applicant or the family, we'll simply advise that the stars have not aligned, and perhaps the family should consider not taking steps to immigrate to Canada if their ultimate goal is permanent residence.
I think that's a key to the fraud is it takes a certain amount of integrity and courage to sell somebody who you know will pay you the money if you sell them a dream. And that's why you have such a good reputation in industries. You might have somebody who's prepared to give you all of their money, and you could just tell them they'd be successful, but you, right at that first point, will say, hey, look, I really want to come here, but you don't qualify now. Maybe you need to come X, Y, and Z, and you can try in 5 years. That's the type of thing that builds a great reputation, I believe. And when people start imitating you, it's a sign that you are respected in the field, but it's also a sign that people have to be very, very careful before they send their money to people promising a quick them into Canada.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great point. I want to get back to a point that both you, Sean, and then you touched on. If you're looking to work in Canada, how can you best approach that? So how can I work in Canada as I'm looking to come here to work?
Well, first of all, you can study, and if you follow the steps that a new inter team advise and have, the proper program of study, and to have the continuous study program, be eligible, quite likely be eligible for a postgraduate work permit, which translates into an employment opportunity following graduation, which in the current if the immigration scenario allows postgraduate students who have invested in Canada with their time and with enhancing their education to work and apply for permanent residency in the future through one of the streams.
Can I ask you a question? Because as an ex-military guy, I love the concept of strategy. And so anybody who's thinking about coming to Canada, you have to think about it like you have a 2-year business plan. Like you have to run strategy.
Yes.
Right? It's not just, I want it, I'll pay somebody who'll have it. I think our experience, especially your experiences, one of the fastest and easiest ways is to get a child to come to your set. Now, if, let's say, I am in India and I have resources about what my child study in Canada, if I send them to study in Canada, is it possible for me, my wife, to come over after? Does that form part of the plan?
Yes, that could be, but it will be a very far-fetched plan because if I was to come here as a student or someone was supposed to come here as a student, first they would have to finish their education, apply for, then they would get a work permit. Then they have to meet the working requirements, the work experience, and then apply for permanent residence. So all this can take up to anywhere from 2 to 3 years or even longer. And then they would be eligible to, once they have their permanent residence, they need to have income requirements, and then they can sponsor their parents. And currently, this parent sponsorship is like a lottery system. So, and there's no guarantee. Like, we've had clients where they've been applying every single year to be in the pool for like last 2 years. They haven't been selected. So it may or may not be possible. And that's why when a family comes to us, we do that assessment to see. A lot of times, say the parents can be part of the investor class, or we can find something as they're older, and then we might have to separate the kids. So if they're under 22, they can be included with the parents, but if they don't meet the dependent definition, that we advise how those children that are no longer dependents can come on their own. So we might have to run things parallel. We might have to do multiple things for the family at the same time.
Sean, you were talking before we went on camera about the importance of registering that dependent age. Could you tell them about what you were saying in that regard?
Yeah, absolutely. And as Anu has articulated, if a principal applicant is mom or dad, and they're able to secure an invitation to apply for permanent residency, so long as the dependent child, young adult, is under the age of 22 at the time the application for permanent residence is made, those family members, those young adults, children, are able to have their application for permanent residence processed under one of the parents who would be the principal.
I want to touch on something that you had talked about before we got into the topic of fraud, which is working in Canada. One of the most frequently asked question number 3 on our list is, how can I work in Canada?
Well, working in Canada is generally rooted in one of two ways. The first is to study in Canada, complete a degree, and apply for it, receive a postgraduate work permit, which could be issued now for up to 3 years in duration. The second way is to find arranged employment. If there is a labor shortage in Canada, Canadian employers are eligible to apply for a labor market impact assessment through the temporary foreign worker program that will allow eligible workers to receive a labor market impact assessment and thereafter apply for a work permit allowing them temporary status in Canada as a worker. There are other ways to secure a work permit through business investment. There is a significant benefit provision federally where those that have a plan to start a business and show demonstrative steps that they've taken to establish a business that has a social and economic benefit to Canada may apply for a work permit. There's also intercompany transfer that allows those that work for a multinational company or have a company overseas that wishes to start a branch or subsidiary in Canada to apply for temporary residence through a work permit. There are also other ways through the United States-Mexico Canada Free Trade Agreement, formerly NAFTA. There are also agreements between Canada and other countries in South America, Europe, that allows for entrepreneurs and skilled professionals to apply directly for work permits and other status.
Yeah, the only thing I would like to add here is people from visa-exempt countries also have the option of applying for IC work permits, international experience class, where they can come, enjoy living in Canada, explore the country, and also have a work permit and work while they are exploring the country. And then they have options for permanent residence if they choose to stay.
And it's a great pathway. Unfortunately, it's not currently available to our friends in India.
Yes, that's right.
Not number 4. How can I get temporary residency in Canada?
I do.
Sure. So there are different pathways of how one can get permanent residence. Like we talked earlier, that you can come here as a temporary worker or a student and make your way. Spend a couple years studying on a study permit, and to make sure that you meet the requirements to get the work permit. Once you have worked for at least minimum of 1 year, you are eligible to apply under the federal program under the Canadian Experience Plus But if you were, say, in Alberta and you wanted to apply under the provincial program, postgraduate needs to be working only for 6 months in a skilled program, and then they can I should mention that their work experience has to be related to the education that they've done, and they will be eligible to apply to the province directly. And there are other ways on how people can get selected from the province under the federal application.
And I think that's where some intangibles come into play, because you can come under these programs, but if you don't have the expert guidance behind the scenes to make sure that the program matches somewhere where you can get a job, there's no sense coming and getting an education, but you can't get a job in that field. It's going to delay your ability to become a permanent resident. And I think that's why working with you guys in many ways gives people a greater advantage, because there's strategy behind every city.
There's a lot of strategy involved. And as we discussed earlier, increasingly the provinces play a very significant role in immigration policy in Canada. Provinces had the ability to issue letters of support to support those that are seeking to live and work in the province with a letter of support for a work permit. For instance, in the province of Alberta, under the rubric of the Alberta Advantage Immigration Program, a new investment program has been launched, the Rural Entrepreneur Investment Stream. Under this stream, those skilled professionals and those with business experience are able to do an exploratory visit. The province of Alberta is not in a position to sponsor a prospective visitor for the visa, that if an interested individual or family can secure their own temporary resident visas, visitor visas, come to Alberta, do an exploratory visit. They can be introduced to a community. They can discuss a potential business opportunity, and if they meet the program requirements, which is a minimum investment of $200,000, then that applicant can go through a process where after a business plan is formulated in connection with the supporting community, the province of Alberta can use its authority under immigration regulation 205 to write a letter in support of a work permit for that applicant. In many cases, the federal government will look at that and expedite the processing of that application, because it's in the economic and the social benefits of the supporting province. So that's another way. There's a bit of texture to that process, and that's why we strongly encourage those that are seeking resettlement options to look at the many ways that may be available. There may not just be a singular pathway for your family. There may be several. And what we do is cross-thread all of the options that may be available, and to advise your family properly on what those options mean.
Cool. Let's move on to number 5. What is express entry in Canada?
I think you're an expert in this.
So express entry has different options. You can be selected under the federal program under the Canadian Experience class. That means that you have a 1 year of skilled work experience in Canada within the last 3 years. It doesn't have to be just one job. It can be a combination of different jobs, as long as they're both skilled. And you complete the 1 year, or you meet the number of hours. So that's one stream under the express entry. Then you have the federal.
That's 4. There's 4 streams.
Yeah, so you have the federal skilled, and the third one would be the provincial nominee, where the province invites you to apply for permanent residence under the federal program. So you will be invited by an individual province, where you will apply to that province, submitting your credentials, and then the province will decide that yes, you will be of benefit to our province, and then they will issue you a nomination letter that gives you 600 coins that are added to your federal profile. And then you become eligible under the GNP program, under the federal, and then the last would be the skilled trades.
I think what I'm getting from this conversation myself is the importance of working with people who know the details. greatly increase the likelihood of success because there are a lot of details and you have to navigate these wires in order to get your family to care.
Yes, and also another thing with Federal Express Entry, like they didn't have a lot of draws under the federal skill. Immigration just recently started doing these draws, and the points are very high. So currently the point system is over 500, which is not easy to get for a lot of people, and people are disheartened by the fact that they're not being selected under the federal program. But they always do have the chance or to be selected by the province directly. So if they're eligible and they're even short of points, we still encourage our clients to have that profile in. It doesn't cost anything. And just to have the opportunity, you never know when the points can drop or there can be changes that come through. So it's good to have that as an option, right? Yeah.
We're going number 6. All right. How long does it take to immigrate to Canada?
The lawyer answer would be, it depends.
Yes.
It is a very hard question. There is no right answer to it. But I'll let you speak to that.
Well,
yes.
in terms of permanent residence, we generally advise our clients that they're looking at a 1 year to 3 year process. If it is a situation where an applicant has been selected through a provincially supported express entry system, enhanced PNP, we had a client recently approved through that system in 4 months. Now, they were able to, case of this client, highly skilled, in-demand occupation, high level of education, impeccable language skills. Their positioning in the express entry system was strong. The province that supported this particular candidate added 600 points and was pursued to an agreement with the government of Canada through an expedited processing system. So we had clients approved for permanent residency in as low as 4 months. And then we've also had clients that have been in a process for more than 3 years to secure the permanent residence. Temporary residence, we've supported, we've assisted clients who have received support for arranged employment with labor market impact assessment. They work in the hospitality industry, and hospitality is an industry that is in need of support for temporary workers. And so we've been having work permits approved overseas in 30 to 60 days.
Yeah.
Other cases, it's 5 months temporary status.
I think the time element is really relevant to people who are trying to immigrate to Canada. And Anu was speaking about this. You can get your application, but at some point you lose control because now the government has it, and they may not have enough resources to process them. And having the bench strength behind your application is important. I wonder if you could speak to the mandamus applications and how that can drastically change somebody's application.
Yeah, for sure. So especially since COVID, there has been a lot of backlogs, especially in New Delhi. It's one of the busiest visa offices all over the world. And we've seen there has been delays on many different applications, whether it's work permits, spouse permits, study permits, and even permanent residence applications, family sponsorships. Recently, we've been working on a lot of mandamus applications. We do a demand letter to the visa office if the processing time has been passed. So IRCC provides a guideline for processing times for different kind of applications. And if we feel that there has been an unjustified delay on an application and there is no correspondence from the visa office despite our follow-ups, and even we try and send our clients to the MP office, try to get updates, and we haven't been successful in getting anything from the visa office, we decide to do a demand letter requesting the visa office to give us an update, a substantial update in terms of what's going on with the application. And sometimes we're lucky that they will respond. They will ask for updated documents, updated medicals, police clearances, and sometimes they're still silent. And that's when we decide we have to make a call. Then is it worth going to the Federal Court of Canada to see if we can get the application moving, and then file for a mandamus application and proceed to the court to have the court let the visa office do the right thing and to actually process it within a reasonable time.
Is this a fair summary? The government is overwhelmed by thousands of applications, many of which are in the middle that are very legitimate and should be approved.
Yes.
And if you don't have the bench strength or the legal team with the consultants to be able to say, hey, you're taking too long, we're going to bring this to court. Once you bring it to court, all of a sudden it jumps you from way down here right up to the top and you get reviewed. And that's why a lot of people don't get the justice they deserve, is because they're just waiting for a response. And you need a team who will be proactive while it's still.
And that's exactly what it is. But also there is a risk to that. And what we've seen is sometimes the visa office would just come back in a few days and end up refusing the application. And that's why it's really important to make that call that you cannot do these applications for everybody. But when you know that your client's rock solid, they have everything that's required, and there's no reason why such an application should be refused, we make that decision and we power through and we move
And that refusal is a gift too for lawyers like us, because that's a punitive decision.
Yes.
And if the visa just punishes this person for making noise, well, we'll put that bit right in the federal court.
Exactly. Yes.
There are some, and we'll get them in.
Yes.
Not only do you need your application to be rock solid, we also need a rock solid legal team.
Fair.
Next question, number 7. Do I need a job offer to immigrate to Canada?
The answer is not necessarily, but it sure helps.
Definitely it helps.
At any time, an applicant can find an employer that is legally entitled to sponsor an application to support them, then that's an important first step. Canada's immigration policy is transitioning. It has been very fluid. It has changed to adapt to the pandemic, and it's also changing to meet Canada's needs going forward as our economy grows. And so it's very important. What first step is finding employment. If you can get your foot in the door and work in Canada, it's a very important step in finding a valid permanent residence.
I think that always comes back to language. So even, let's say you're a 13-year-old with high ambitions watching this video, or you're 60, like, if you want to come to Canada, you have to have amazing. So don't neglect your education at the lowest level, and always seek education, because we need people in Canada, but you have to speak English or French to be able to get here. If you can get that top score plus have the education, employers are going to want to hire you, right? And you can reach out to employers and be proactive to try and get a job.
Yeah. And do you want to just quickly summarize those 4 pathways again if you did want to come through Canada with trying to access a job?
Yeah, so
In the express intake system.
yeah. So for overseas applicant, it will probably just be the federal skilled. There are some selections by the province under the federal for people that are overseas, but what the provinces are doing is preference to people that are already here. But we've had some clients that have been fortunate enough to be selected, even though they're overseas. So they've been selected by the province, and then skilled trades.
And the Canadian experience.
Yes,
Four categories.
Yes.
Federal skilled trades, federal skilled workers, Canadian experience class, and then PN, provincial nominations.
Yeah, exactly. All right, move on to question number 8. How much money do you need to immigrate to Canada?
Again, the answer is it depends. And generally, it's generally recognized that you should have the appropriate funding to establish yourself in Canada. It depends on if it's a temporary residence. If you have employment, then that is recognized as essentially
Yeah, just helps with their overall what they can provide, right? They're not going to be dependent on the services of the government. They can self-support. So having a job offer always helps, showing that they're well established overseas. A lot of times we get asked by clients, oh, how much money do they show? I say show everything you have. The more you're able to show your establishment, the better for the government to make that assessment that you're not going to be a burden on the Canadian government.
I also think that question is popular because people want to know when they say how much weight do I need to, where it's Canada, what are the fees?
Yeah.
Because there's a big variance in fees, and as you can tell, there's a lot of knowledge required. Maybe you could speak about, what type of resources you need for fees to come into different.
Yeah, what's the pro stack?
Well, again, it depends on the program. You're not, if you're coming as a temporary foreign worker and you're sponsored by an employer, your cost of professional assistance will be nominal. If, however, you're an investment fund that is looking to make a sizable investment as required by the programs that allow for such migration, and you're looking at a professional fee that would be proportionate to the investment. Generally speaking, one could expect $50,000 in the business class investor as a professional fee to navigate through the complexities of the program that's being contemplated. In addition to that, there will need to be an investment as low as, practically speaking, $200,000. Different provinces have different thresholds. The provinces are highly involved in the investment program. It can be as high as close to $1 million. It's in Ontario, the Greater Toronto.
Even BC is like over 500 up to like 750. So it depends on where you would like to relocate.
And also keep in mind that your family is going to need some things up front here. Maybe you want to purchase your first car. Some families purchase it for cash, but before they're able to get financing. There's furniture, there's relocation. Perhaps you're looking at renting a nice home. So our teams can help map out a schedule depending on what it is that a schedule cost, depending on what it is that your family would like to do.
Great. Question 9. I know this is a hot question, one that you guys get a lot. How do I apply for a Canadian permanent residency?
Sure, yeah. So we kind of talked about this. There are different streams on how you can apply for permanent residency. You can apply under the family sponsorship clause. You have 2-year work experience under the federal program, express entry, or the provincial programs that are available. And the other pathway is you come here on a temporary residence and then make your way up for permanent residency. And another option would be how we're talking about the investor class. You apply for permanent residence and work permit from get-go, and then you have your residency.
Yeah, and one of the nice things about having a team behind you is if you're applying for permanent residency, a lot of people, you have to be careful not to run afoul of the law, right? You can't be involved. You can't get a drinking and driving.
Yes.
Any type of criminal charge while you're applying can really jeopardize their application. So you need, this happens a lot with students.
Yes.
People are they're over here studying, but they get a bit wild at a university party. If they do something dumb and they get convicted, they might be criminally disqualified. That's why you need a team that could help you and guide them.
Yes, so it's a really good point. You do, because permanent residency, how was mentioned that it can take from 1 to 3 years, and things can happen during that 3 years, where we also see somebody could develop a condition, and then that can cause a lot of impact on the government, where they have to pay for the medicines, and those people can become medically inadmissible to Canada. So not only criminal charges, but a medical condition can also, and then we help them how you would challenge the medical inadmissibility. And we've had success where we basically find options for our clients how they can get treatments, or they can basically, the government has a max cap of what they would want to spend on someone in terms of medication. So what we do is basically argue that how this client does not need the cap, they're under that cap, right? So we help them with any issues that may arise after they've applied for permanent residence.
And so important because if one member of the family becomes and
Yes.
inadmissible medically,
Oh,
then the entire family comes
Yes.
in this was severe constant disaster.
Yeah, it's
Good advocacy to be a
Fair.
full family that's about to get PR.
Yes.
One kid gets sick or somebody gets sick,
Yeah.
and then you like, it is a disaster.
Yeah. Or like when I had clients where they have a newborn has autism or like, and when the cost related to that, or client got Crohn's disease or something while their application is in process and or someone gets cancer. And yeah, so we have to deal with that aspect as well.
interesting. Well, you've made it to the 10th question, which is how do you become a citizen of Canada?
Well, we discussed this earlier off camera. Essentially, it's about maintaining residency, and I'll let you speak to that because we both had cases before where clients have achieved permanent residency and then somehow missed the residency requirement, which is a certain period of time, the thing every 5 years.
That's right. So when someone's granted permanent residency, they get a 5-year window, and they are supposed to be in Canada for 2 years, 730 days out of the 5 years to maintain their residency. And we've had clients where they couldn't be physically present in Canada, and they've lost their residency. They're unable to renew it after the 5-year window. And with regards to citizenship, you need to be in Canada for 3 years. But you don't have to be here at once. You can go in and out, you can have time off, but you do need to maintain. It's really important not just to get residency, but be able to maintain that.
And the key is that 1,095
Yes.
days. So you're in Canada, 1,095 days. Apply for your Canadian citizenship. That's right. And then that burden of maintaining residency is overcome.
That's right.
And then families are free to have more liberty to arrange the trap.
And we've seen people miss the window by a few days. Like, you really have to be on top of it because it's a strict requirement, and you invested all this time.
Yes.
That last 5% of the race, you have to stay on top of your game to make sure you get vaccinated.
And that's and we've had cases where people don't beat the residency, but there are enough humanitarian factors that can overcome that, and then we have to appeal to the immigration division. Yes, the circumstances, or say they're working, like we've had clients that are doctors and they were working overseas throughout the pandemic. So they gave them the humanitarian compassionate relief before they were allowed, even with citizenship. So they're very, very strict on citizenship applications. If you don't meet the requirement, it's a strict no. But the minute you can get ministerial relief on citizenship applications depending on how you're contributing to Canada. So there is argument there. There's case law on that as well. So yeah.
Again, good advocacy is needed. Any other summarizing thoughts, guys, before we wrap this up?
I would just share with our audience that resettlement to Canada is sometimes fluid and complex, and you're be very well advised to engage with professionals who you can trust at the very start of your journey, and that will increase your successes of achieving your goals of permanent and permanent residence or Canadian citizenship.
Well, what I would say is interview multiple people. This is one of the biggest and most important decisions in your family's life, right? And a bad hiring decision here can liquidate your family fortune and prevent you from ever coming to Canada. So interview, don't go with the first person who promises everything. Interview multiple people. See if you resonate with them. See if you can speak to their clients. See if they've ever stepped foot on your side of the world. That's one of the reasons why we go over to India, why we're going to open up a brick and mortar there. It's because we want people to feel safe that by investing in us, they have which is safe investment, no, we will get them there. And we would never be insulted if you interviewed other people. In fact, I'd want you to interview other people to see the difference between our level of commitment and expertise compared to others.
And having the right guidance from get-go, right? But again, a lot of times we do get people that are, didn't have the right guidance, but then we help them to fix things, and it's part of our job.
Thank you for remaining with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. We look forward to hopefully welcoming you to Canada.